what happens when a teacher's attempt to humiliate a student backfires in the most brilliant way possible. The familiar hum of middle school chatter filled the corridors as students eagerly filed into room 207 at Silview Middle School in Cleveland, Ohio. For most 7th graders, math class was a dreary routine, a monotonous ritual that seemed to sap energy and enthusiasm. Today, however, something extraordinary was poised to unfold that would shatter the expected script of mediocrity. Amid the usual clamor and banter, one girl sat quietly near the back of the classroom. Her eyes remained fixed on the pages of a well-worn notebook, and a pencil tapped in a steady, rhythmic beat against her desk. Her name was Alyssa. At only 12 years old, she had mastered the subtle art of blending into the background, a talent cultivated over years of being overlooked and underestimated. Alyssa was the kind of student that most teachers barely noticed. She rarely raised her hand unless called upon, consistently turned in her homework on time, and seemed to avoid attention as if it were an unwelcome burden. Yet hidden beneath her unassuming exterior was a secret. Her notebooks were filled not only with standard class notes, but also with advanced math problems far beyond what her grade level required, solved with meticulous care in the margins. This was her little secret, a private treasure of brilliance that no one had yet seen. In stark contrast to Alyssa's quiet, almost invisible presence was her teacher, Mrs. Grant. Renowned for her sharp tongue and unyielding standards, Mrs. Grant had little tolerance for mediocrity. At 42 years old, she was a seasoned educator who believed in the doctrine of tough love. When she perceived that students were slacking off, she did not hesitate to call them out forcefully. Some students trembled at the mere mention of her name. Others, while secretly admiring her no-nonsense attitude, still kept their distance. On this particular day, however, frustration was etched clearly across Mrs. Grant's face as she scanned the classroom. The rows of slumped shoulders and blank stares seemed to confirm her worst fears about her students' apathy. Holding up a worksheet with an air of exasperation, Mrs. Grant declared, "This is basic algebra, basic, and yet half of you can't even figure it out." Her voice, laced with biting criticism, cut through the low murmur of side conversations and silenced any dissent instantly. "I've been teaching this unit for weeks and still nothing," she continued, slapping the paper onto her desk with a sigh that reverberated around the room. "What is it going to take to get you all to care?" While most of the class fidgeted or exchanged uneasy glances, Alyssa maintained her focus on her notebook, pretending to review her work. It was not so much that she was frightened of Mrs. Grant. In fact, she wasn't truly scared, but she loathed being forced into the spotlight. Over the years, she had perfected the art of invisibility, a survival skill that allowed her to remain unnoticed. Yet on this day, that carefully constructed bubble of anonymity was on the verge of bursting. Mrs. Grant began pacing at the front of the room, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor as if marking the passage of time in a world that was about to change. "You're going to see questions like these on every test from now until college," she warned in a tone that brooked no argument. "And if you don't understand them now, you're setting yourselves up for failure." Her eyes swept over the classroom, lingering for just a moment longer on each student than usual, a subtle, almost imperceptible test of their attention. Finally, her gaze landed on Alyssa. "Miss Daniels?" Mrs. Grant called out, her voice slicing through the thick silence that had descended over the room. Startled, Alyssa's head jerked upward and a familiar churn of anxiety twisted in her stomach. "You've been awfully quiet back there. Let's see if you've been paying attention," Mrs. Grant continued, her tone both challenging and unyielding. Instantly, Alyssa's cheeks flushed crimson as every student turned to focus on her. The unwanted attention was overwhelming. She longed to shrink into her seat and vanish into the background, but there was no escape. With a trembling nod, she managed to utter a barely audible, "Yes, ma'am." Yet Mrs. Grant was far from finished. With brisk determination, she strode over to the board, seized a piece of chalk and began to scribble furiously. In mere moments, an equation began to materialize, a sprawling labyrinth of variables and exponents that stretched across the board as if it were a passage from a college-level textbook, rather than a lesson for 7th graders. Gasps and low murmurs rippled through the room as the students exchanged bewildered glances. For many, the equation appeared as if written in an entirely foreign language. Rather than calling for a volunteer, Mrs. Grant's gaze fixed intently on Alyssa, With a raised eyebrow and a gesture toward the board, she commanded, "Solve it." For a long, agonizing moment, Alyssa remained rooted in her seat. The full weight of every pair of eyes in the room pressed down on her, and the challenge hung in the air like a storm cloud on the verge of breaking. The atmosphere became electric as every student watched her, caught between morbid curiosity and relief that they were not in her position. Soft whispers began to drift through the room, snatches of "no way she can do that," "what even is that?" and a few muffled laughs punctuated the tense silence. Alyssa's grip on her pencil tightened until her knuckles turned white, yet her mind was not overcome by panic. Instead, the countless hours spent in secret study, nights poring over advanced math problems and scribbling solutions in the margins of her notebooks, raced through her thoughts with the precision of a well-rehearsed algorithm. Now is the moment, she thought, as each symbol and number in her mind aligned perfectly like the pieces of a complex puzzle. Perfect, perfect puzzle. Mrs. Grant crossed her arms and leaned against her desk, her tone dripping with impatience and a hint of derision. "Do you need a calculator?" she taunted sarcastically, drawing a round of chuckles from the class. But Alyssa barely registered the remark. Her focus was absolute. Every thought in her mind fell into place like finely meshed gears of a clock. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Alyssa rose from her seat. The sound of her chair scraping against the floor was the only interruption to the heavy silence that now enveloped the room. It was not pure confidence that drove her forward, but rather a quiet, burning determination, a resolve that had been steadily building beneath the surface for years. With deliberate, measured steps, she approached the board. Her sneakers scuffed softly against the tiled floor as she reached for the piece of chalk. The coolness of the chalk in her hand served as a tangible reminder of the challenge before her, and she did not hesitate. The room fell utterly silent, save for the faint hum of the overhead lights. Alyssa's eyes scanned the intimidating equations sprawled across the board. Her brain, well practiced in the language of numbers, worked at an astonishing speed as it processed each variable as if they were long-time friends coming together in perfect harmony. At first, the initial letters and numbers she scribbled on the board appeared random and disjointed, but gradually, as more symbols filled the space, a coherent pattern emerged. Her movements were deliberate and her strokes precise. She was not merely solving the problem, she was untangling it, deconstructing it into manageable pieces that fit together with elegant precision. As Alyssa continued, Mrs. Grant's earlier smirk began to fade. She stepped closer to the board, her arms outstretched in a gesture that betrayed a growing sense of reluctant admiration. The room was so quiet now that the sound of chalk scratching against the board was nearly deafening. By the time Alyssa reached the midpoint of the equation, the earlier whispers had entirely subsided. The entire class watched in stunned silence, their eyes flitting between the steadily evolving solution on the board and Alyssa's composed, determined face. It was as though she had performed this task 100 times before, a routine etched into her memory by countless nights of practice and weekends spent immersed in college-level math books. After a brief, deliberate pause, merely a moment to double-check her calculations, Alyssa resumed her work with a few swift, confident strokes. Then, with a final flourish that seemed to capture every bit of her hidden brilliance, she wrote the final answer on the board, neatly circled it, and stepped back. The entire board was now awash with her elegant handwriting, a labyrinth of numbers and symbols that, against all odds, made perfect sense. Turning to face the class, her chalk-dusted hands hung loosely by her sides, and her breathing remained steady, betraying none of the internal storm that must have raged within her moments before. For a long, heavy moment, Mrs. Grant stood frozen, her eyes darting over the solution as she slowly traced the equation with a trembling finger. Under her breath, she muttered softly as she verified each detail. Finally, stepping back with an unreadable expression, she allowed the silence to stretch even further. The quiet was not merely from the teacher, it resonated deeply throughout the room, as every student absorbed the magnitude of what they had just witnessed. Alyssa remained at the front, her heart pounding fiercely in her chest, yet her face was a mask of serene composure. She scanned the room briefly, catching glimpses of wide eyes and slack jaws. Not one student dared laugh or jeer. After what felt like an eternity, Mrs. Grant's gaze softened, and with a voice gentler than anyone had ever heard her speak, she finally asked, "How did you know to do that?" Alyssa shifted slightly on her feet, the discomfort of sudden, unwanted attention evident in her hesitant posture. "I've been studying," she replied in a quiet, almost inaudible whisper. "It all made sense once I broke it down." Mrs. Grant's eyes flickered with a mix of disbelief and reluctant admiration as she absorbed Alyssa's simple yet profound explanation. "I like math," Alyssa added, her words causing a ripple of murmurs to spread through the classroom. Some students exchanged glances, while others whispered behind cupped hands. No one had ever expected this from Alyssa, the quiet girl who always seemed to vanish into the background. It wasn't only the students who were struggling to grasp the magnitude of the moment. Mrs. Grant herself, a teacher who prided herself on her ability to spot hidden potential, suddenly realized that she had grossly underestimated a child whose brilliance had been hiding in plain sight all along. Clearing her throat, she gestured toward the board and said, "Let's take a moment to appreciate what just happened here. Alyssa, you not only solved this problem, but you did it in a way that demonstrates a level of understanding far beyond what we expected at your age." Her voice, measured and tinged with awe, resonated throughout the room. Alyssa's cheeks burned with unexpected pride as she stood there, caught between the desire to retreat into anonymity and the thrill of being seen. Slowly, the stunned silence of the class began to break into tentative applause, which gradually grew louder and more confident. Mrs. Grant raised her hand to quiet the clapping, her expression thoughtful. "Why didn't you ever speak up before if you can do this?" she asked gently. Alyssa hesitated, struggling to articulate the deep-seated fear of standing out. A fear so ingrained that invisibility had once felt like a shield. "I didn't think anyone would care," she murmured softly. Mrs. Grant's stern demeanor softened further as she replied, "You were wrong about that. You are extraordinary, Alyssa, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." The sincerity of her apology hung in the air, transforming the classroom's atmosphere. As the final bell rang, signaling the end of the day, the other students began to gather their belongings, occasionally glancing at Alyssa with expressions of newfound admiration. Mrs. Grant called out, "Can you stay for a moment?" And Alyssa, still clutching her notebook, remained seated as the last stragglers filed out of the room. Approaching with her usual commanding presence now tempered by genuine warmth, Miss Grant sat on the edge of her desk and folded her arms, regarding Alyssa with an intensity that was almost tender. "I owe you an apology," she began in a tone that was unusually sincere. Alyssa blinked, unsure of how to respond. "I underestimated you," Mrs. Grant continued. "I assumed you were just coasting along, but I was wrong. You're extraordinary, Alyssa, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." The words, heavy with meaning, resonated deeply within Alyssa. No teacher had ever spoken to her like this, not as a student, but as an individual with remarkable potential. Mrs. Grant went on, her voice gaining strength. "You have a gift. It isn't just about solving equations, it's about the way you think, the way you approach problems. That is something rare, something you should never hide." Alyssa looked down at her hands, her fingers tracing the edges of her notebook, and murmured, "I just didn't think it mattered." "It matters, Alyssa," Miss Grant replied firmly, "and I want to help you. There are programs, competitions, and opportunities that could challenge you and help you grow. I truly believe you could be amazing." The thought of stepping out of her familiar comfort zone both terrified and excited Alyssa. Looking up at Mrs. Grant, who now appeared less as an intimidating figure and more as a genuine mentor, Alyssa managed a small, tentative smile. "I'll think about it," she whispered softly. That evening, as Alyssa sat at the kitchen table with her parents, she hesitated before recounting the day's events. Her parents, long accustomed to her quiet, reserved nature and often worried that she was not reaching her full potential, listened intently as she described how Mrs. Grant had challenged her, how she had solved the seemingly impossible equation, and how the class had reacted in stunned silence before erupting into applause. Her mother squeezed her hand and said, "You've always been capable of amazing things. I'm so glad the world is finally starting to see what we already knew." Her father added, "This is just the beginning, Alyssa. Don't ever be afraid to show the world what you can do." In that heartfelt moment, something profound shifted within Alyssa. No longer did she feel compelled to remain invisible in the background. Instead, a spark of possibility and pride ignited within her. The rest of the day passed in a blur of changed perceptions. During lunch, classmates approached her with questions, some curious, others congratulatory. And although a part of her still yearned to retreat into the safety of anonymity, Another part began to embrace the newfound recognition of her talents. As the final bell rang and Alyssa gathered her belongings, the hallway was filled with murmurs of admiration. No longer were the whispers mocking or indifferent. They carried notes of awe and wonder. Phrases like "she's a genius" and "I never knew she could do that" drifted through the air. Slowly, Alyssa walked down the corridor, her mind awash with thoughts of what she had accomplished and what the future might hold, if she allowed her hidden talents to flourish. That night, as Alyssa sat alone with her cherished notebook, the blank page before her was no longer a repository for secrets and guarded thoughts. Instead, it shimmered with possibility, a canvas for ideas, goals, and dreams. With a steady hand, she began to write not only equations, but also aspirations. "What if I enter one of those math competitions Mrs. Grant mentioned?" she mused. "What if I let the world see what I can do?" Although traces of fear still lingered, the exhilaration of embracing her true potential outweighed them. In that moment, Alyssa realized that she never wanted to return to a life of hiding. She yearned to step into the light and share her brilliance. Alyssa's story, more than just a singular moment of triumph in a classroom, became a powerful reminder that every individual harbors untapped potential and dreams waiting to be pursued. Too often, people are underestimated by others and even by themselves. But sometimes all it takes is one moment, a single challenge, to unveil the brilliance that has always been there. Whether you are a student, a teacher, a parent, or simply someone trying to navigate the complexities of life, Alyssa's experience is a call to action. Do not let fear or doubt hold you back, and do not allow others to define what you are capable of achieving. Never underestimate the transformative power of stepping forward, even when it seems impossible. So, what is your hidden talent? What unique gift have you kept to yourself, afraid to let it shine? Perhaps now is the time to take that first step. Grab the metaphorical chalk and write your own story. If you find inspiration in Alyssa's journey, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Support her story by liking, sharing, and subscribing for more narratives of quiet triumph and boundless potential. Your support matters, and together we can spread the message that every one of us is capable of greatness. As you close this account, pause for a moment to reflect on what is stopping you from revealing your true self to the world. Let Alyssa's courage remind you that your potential is limitless, and that every challenge you face is an opportunity to learn, grow, and transform your life. Embrace your inner strength, step into the light, and never be afraid to let your brilliance shine through. In the days and weeks that followed that transformative class, a ripple effect spread throughout Silview Middle School. Alyssa's quiet breakthrough became a whispered legend among the students, a story retold with admiration in hushed tones during lunch breaks and after school. Teachers, once skeptical of the unassuming girl who always sat at the back, began to notice the subtle shift in her demeanor. Her notebooks, previously overlooked, were now studied with curiosity by those who dared glance inside. Even Mrs. Grant, whose strict reputation had long preceded her, found herself re-examining her own approach to teaching. She started encouraging other students to share their thoughts and ideas, striving to create an environment where every voice mattered. Alyssa too began to change. The incident at the board was a turning point, a moment that unlocked a reservoir of confidence she had never known she possessed. No longer content with simply existing in the background, she started to participate more actively in class discussions. Her newfound voice resonated with her peers, many of whom discovered their own hidden talents as a result. It was as if a dam had been broken, releasing a torrent of creativity, curiosity, and ambition that had been held back for far too long. Her journey inspired not only her classmates, but also a group of dedicated teachers who began to implement new teaching methods designed to draw out the unique abilities of each student. After that day, Mrs. Grant organized extracurricular math clubs, competitions, and mentorship programs. She invited local mathematicians to speak with the students, and slowly, the once dreary math class transformed into a hub of excitement and exploration. Alyssa found herself at the forefront of this change, her quiet brilliance now celebrated rather than ignored. The transformation extended beyond the classroom. Alyssa's success sparked conversations among parents about the importance of nurturing every child's potential, regardless of how inconspicuous they might appear. At school board meetings, discussions about educational reform began to include new strategies for recognizing and developing hidden talents. Alyssa's story became a beacon of hope for those who believed that every child deserved a chance to shine, a reminder that sometimes the most remarkable gifts are found in the most unexpected places. In time, Alyssa herself embraced her role as a symbol of quiet resilience. She joined community programs that challenged her intellectually, participated in regional math competitions, and even began tutoring younger students who struggled with math. Her journey was not without its challenges. Stepping out of her comfort zone was often frightening, and there were moments when self-doubt threatened to pull her back into invisibility. Yet, each time she faced those challenges, she remembered the day she had conquered her fears on the board of room 207, a day that proved to her, and to everyone else, that she was capable of extraordinary things. As the years passed, Alyssa's impact on her school and community only deepened. Her quiet determination and extraordinary ability had become an inspiration to many. Former classmates, now young adults, recalled that pivotal moment as the time when everything changed for them, a turning point that taught them the value of stepping forward and embracing their own potential. Even Mrs. Grant, in her later years, would speak of Alyssa with a mixture of pride and wonder, often recounting the story as a lesson in humility and the transformative power of recognizing hidden talent. Alyssa's journey, while centered on a single moment in a middle school classroom, had far-reaching implications. It became a catalyst for change, not only in her own life, but in the lives of countless others. Her success proved that even those who seem invisible can harbor talents that, when nurtured and celebrated, have the power to transform communities and redefine educational practices. Her story was a testament to the idea that every challenge, every moment of vulnerability, could be turned into an opportunity for growth, if met with courage and determination. So, as you reflect on Alyssa's journey, ask yourself, what hidden talents lie dormant within you? What unique gifts have you been too afraid to reveal to the world? Perhaps it's time to step forward, to grab that metaphorical chalk and write your own story of triumph. Let Alyssa's courage inspire you to break free from the chains of fear and self-doubt. Embrace your inner brilliance and never let anyone tell you that you are anything less than extraordinary. If Alyssa's story has stirred something within you, share it with others who might need to hear it. Let it be a call to action, a reminder that every one of us has the potential to achieve greatness if we are willing to take that first step. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories of quiet triumph and boundless potential. Your support not only validates these narratives, but also helps spread a message of hope and resilience far and wide. As you close this account and ponder your own journey, consider what may be holding you back. Is it fear of the spotlight, doubt about your own abilities, or perhaps the nagging worry that, like Alyssa, you may have been overlooked all these years? Today, let her story remind you that your potential is limitless. Every challenge you face is an opportunity to discover a new facet of your inner strength. If you step into the light, embrace your unique talents and never let the fear of standing out keep you in the shadows. Alyssa's story is more than a tale of one day in a classroom. It is a call to awaken the hidden genius within us all. Whether you are a student struggling to find your voice, a teacher seeking to unlock the potential of your pupils, or a parent hoping to nurture the gifts in your child, remember that greatness often lies hidden in plain sight. All it takes is one moment, one challenge, to bring that brilliance to the surface. So, what is stopping you? Take that first courageous step. Let your actions speak louder than your fears. Allow your inner light to shine and write your own narrative of success. For in every one of us lies the capacity for greatness, a quiet, unyielding power waiting to be unleashed upon the world. Alyssa's journey did not end in that singular moment of brilliance on the chalkboard. It marked the beginning of a long and transformative path toward self-empowerment and leadership. In the days, weeks, and months that followed, the impact of that day rippled far beyond the walls of room 207. The incident became a catalyst for change throughout Silview Middle School, inspiring both students and teachers alike to reassess what it meant to recognize hidden potential. Slowly but surely, a new culture began to emerge, a culture where quiet determination was celebrated, where every student was encouraged to step out of the shadows and share their unique talents with the world. As Alyssa continued her studies, her inner fire grew brighter with each challenge she encountered. She began to participate more actively in class discussions, her once muted voice now resonating with confidence. Her newfound willingness to engage sparked a quiet revolution among her peers. Many found the courage to express their own ideas, dreams, and hidden abilities. Teachers, inspired by Alyssa's unexpected breakthrough, started to implement innovative teaching strategies that focused on individualized learning and nurturing each student's unique gifts. They introduced after-school clubs, math competitions, and creative workshops designed to draw out talents that had long been concealed by shyness or self-doubt. In this revitalized environment, learning transformed from a dull obligation into a vibrant exploration of potential. And every student began to realize that brilliance could be found in the most unexpected places. Outside the classroom, Alyssa's transformation had a profound impact on her community. Her story became a topic of conversation at parent-teacher meetings and school board sessions, serving as a powerful reminder that every child, no matter how quiet or unassuming, has untapped potential waiting to be discovered. Local newspapers featured her as a symbol of resilience and academic excellence, and her journey inspired many parents to take a closer look at the hidden abilities of their own children. Alyssa herself embraced opportunities to mentor younger students, sharing her passion for mathematics and her belief in the importance of self-confidence. By tutoring those who struggled with the very subjects that once intimidated her, she not only solidified her own understanding, but also helped build a supportive network where every student felt valued and capable. In time, Alyssa's personal transformation grew into a broader mission. She became an advocate for educational reform, speaking at community events and even at regional conferences about the power of recognizing and nurturing hidden talents. She reminded educators that a student's quiet demeanor often masks a reservoir of creativity and intelligence, urging them to look beyond the surface and offer encouragement rather than criticism. Alyssa's journey was a living testament to the idea that true learning occurs when fear is replaced with trust. Trust in oneself, in one's abilities, and in the support of those who believe in you. Her voice, once nearly silenced by the overwhelming pressure of invisibility, became a beacon of hope for many, proving that even the most overlooked individuals can achieve greatness when given the chance. Years later, reflecting on her early struggles and triumphs, Alyssa would often return to that pivotal day as a source of inspiration. She would remember the trembling start as she rose to the board, the steady rhythm of chalk on the blackboard, and the hush that fell over the classroom as she solved an equation that had once seemed insurmountable. Each recollection reinforced her belief that every obstacle, no matter how daunting, could be overcome with perseverance and a willingness to step into the light. The lessons of that day became her guiding principles. Embrace your unique talents. Never let fear of the spotlight hold you back, and always be open to the possibility that what you consider your weakness might just be your greatest strength. Alyssa's transformation resonated far beyond her own academic success. It ignited a movement within her school and community that championed inclusivity, curiosity, and the celebration of individuality. Her experience underscored a powerful truth, that every challenge can serve as an opportunity for growth, if met with courage and resilience. In the end, Alyssa's story is not merely about solving a difficult math problem. It is about the unyielding spirit that resides in each of us, waiting to be awakened by a single transformative moment. Let Alyssa's journey be a call to action for anyone who has ever felt invisible or underestimated. Her story invites you to reflect on your own hidden talents and to consider what might happen if you dared to share them with the world. Embrace your inner brilliance, step out of the shadows, and write your own narrative of success. For in every one of us lies the potential to achieve greatness, to inspire others, and to transform our lives and communities. Remember, every challenge you face is an opportunity to grow. If you have the courage to seize it, you too can become a beacon of hope and a testament to the limitless power of the human spirit.